guys, and welcome back to our channel. So for today's video, I am going to be talking all about having a natural miscarriage, what to expect, and the things that I use to help me through the miscarriage. And I just want to say, if you've gone through a miscarriage or are going through a miscarriage, I am so sorry, and I know exactly the emotions you're going through right now, and I'm sorry that you even have to watch this video. I have had 2 miscarriages, both of them being extremely different from one another. My first miscarriage, I actually had to have a D&C, so if you guys would like me to make a video about the D&C procedure, I can definitely do that so that you guys can hear both experiences, especially if you're trying to figure out which route you want to go. So if you're having a natural miscarriage, that means that your body is doing it naturally. You're not taking any medications or anything to help induce the miscarriage. It just happens naturally. And for me, I found out that I was going to be miscarrying through an ultrasound. That's always a big question people have. They're like, well, how do you know you're gonna miscarry before you miscarry? And both times I found out through the ultrasound that I would be miscarrying. So I went in for my first official scan and baby did not have a heartbeat. So I did have a warning. I was also bleeding for about 10 days prior to me actually passing everything. So I kind of knew that there was something going on. And I will say that miscarriages are different for every person. And even for me, I've had 2 miscarriages. They're both extremely different from each other. My experience is not going to be your experience, but I do hope that everything that I'm talking about will be of some use for you. So let's get into what to expect when you're having a natural miscarriage. So in my case, I started spotting 10 days before I actually passed everything. So at first it was really pink, light spotting only when I wiped, and then it got to the point where I had to wear a panty liner and then a regular size pad and then a maxi pad. It just kept getting heavier and heavier. I had no cramping up until the night before I actually passed everything. And for me, it personally felt like contractions. Not as bad as labor, but definitely painful, where you kind of have to breathe through them, and so they would come and go kind of like waves. So I knew, I was like, okay, I'm probably gonna miscarry here pretty soon now that I'm feeling these contractions. My uterus is kind of ready to start expelling everything. The day that I actually miscarried, my contractions were definitely picking up. My cramping would go from being pretty solid, like just non-stop cramping, to, like I said before, contractions where it came in waves. So you can definitely expect to have lots of cramping, and that is definitely a sign that your body is getting ready to expel everything. And then for me, when I passed the baby, it was not painful. The passing of the baby wasn't painful in itself, but I did pass the baby perfectly. And after that, my contractions ramped up big time because my body still had to expel the placenta, which was a lot bigger than what the baby was. I could feel myself dilating. If you've ever had a baby before, you definitely know that feeling of like dilation down there. It's almost like a sore feeling. You just feel very sore down there every time you go to the bathroom, because I was on and off the toilet all day long from heavy bleeding and of course passing everything. And every time I sat down, it almost felt worse. But it did help to kind of move things along, and that's actually a trick that people use in labor as well, is they'll sit on the toilet to help them dilate. So like I said, after I passed the baby, that's when my contractions picked up to be pretty bad, to the point where I had to take some pain reliever and get into the bath. It really helped to keep the pain at bay. Something about water is just so therapeutic. So if you are having a hard time keeping the pain under control, I definitely recommend either taking a shower or a bath if you can. I did some Epsom salt and some bath oil and just turned on some YouTube and sat in there basically until the water got cold. And as soon as I got out of the bath and got dressed, that's when I passed the placenta. So I got out and I was just walking around in the kitchen and I felt something come out. It just felt like a gush of blood that came out, and that's actually what I thought had happened, because when you're in the bathtub it kind of keeps everything in, the pressure keeps everything in. So I thought, oh, it's just me walking around that helped release like all of the blood that was coming out. But I grabbed myself and like waddled to the toilet because I'm like, I'm probably leaking everywhere. And that's when I saw that the placenta had came out into my underwear. And that was not painful in itself at all either. So the passing of everything was not painful. It's just the contractions and cramps and a little bit of the dilation that makes you sore. And then as soon as I passed the placenta, my pain was gone. It was like my body expelled everything. And from that point on, it was like, okay, the miscarriage is over with. And I was no longer in pain. I kept telling my husband, I was like, it honestly just feels like a labor, because my butt after labor with Israel felt very sore and just uncomfortable. Just everything down there, the lower back, everything just felt super sore. And that's what a miscarriage is. People don't really realize that when you're miscarrying, it's not just like a heavy period. You, most of the time, depending on how far along you are, you have to dilate. Like for me, I was definitely dilated. After I passed everything, I bled for about a week. So my total bleeding before I passed everything and then after I passed everything was 17 days of bleeding. So you can expect anywhere from a week to, I've heard, even 6 weeks of bleeding. You might pass things in clots. For me, I passed everything intact. So like I said, the baby came out first, perfectly intact in the sac, and then after that, my placenta came out perfectly intact. The whole time I was in contact with my midwife and I was sending her pictures. She was able to help me kind of figure out what was going on, what I was passing. You'll know if you've passed the baby if you see, like I said, my baby came out perfectly in the sac with amniotic fluid, connected, everything just perfect. And it almost looks like either clear or gray or white tissue. And I personally wanted to see my baby, so I was looking for the baby. Some women don't want to do that. And then with the placenta, I've heard people describe it as liver. For me, I've seen placentas before and it looked like a placenta, just smaller than a full-term placenta, if that makes sense. And my recommendation for you is that when you do pass everything, give yourself a moment. Give yourself a couple of minutes to figure out what you want to do with your baby. For me, I did not feel comfortable flushing my baby. I did flush the placenta, but I did not flush my baby. And we decided to get our baby cremated. I know that there are some people who like to give a proper burial, so whether that be in your garden or somewhere special, I just would recommend giving yourself a couple of moments to breathe and kind of figure out what you want to do with your baby's body. So now I'm gonna get into the things that helped me through my miscarriage and help support my body in kind of expelling everything perfectly. So I did mention taking a bath. If you can take a bath, that was my #1 pain reliever. I recommend buying a strainer and putting it in your toilet. That way you can keep track of what you have passed, because you want to make sure that your miscarriage is complete. If it is incomplete, that's when you would need to go in and get a D&C to remove all the rest of the tissue. A good indicator to know that if you've passed everything is if your bleeding completely stops and does not come back. My midwife told me to watch for up and down bleeding. So if it slows down and picks back up, that's not a very good sign. And also, if you wait a couple weeks after your miscarriage and take a pregnancy test, that will be a good indicator that you passed all the tissue as well. For me, I went to my OB and had a checkup there, and they were able to do a pregnancy test for me, which indicated that I in fact did pass everything. So my midwife gave me kind of like a miscarriage package, and she also does have a website online that you can order from. I don't know if you'd be able to get these in time, but she did give me cramp bark. So this is a homeopathic remedy for cramps. You take a dropper full and stick it under your tongue and let it sit, and do it about every 15 minutes if you're needing some natural pain reliever. I will tell you that the stuff tastes absolutely disgusting. It's horrific, but it works. She also gave me her blend that I used during both of my miscarriages called Nourish and Restore. And this will help tone your uterus and also help empty everything that's inside of it. And then on top of that, she gave me Shepherd's Purse, which is another herb that will help empty your uterus. And I will give you guys a disclaimer, those items will not force a miscarriage. I used all of those homeopathic remedies with my first miscarriage and still had to end up getting a D&C because my body would not budge. So do not try to use those to induce a miscarriage. They're simply there to help support your body when it's already started the process. And then for me, I used Clary Sage Essential Oil. Every time I felt contractions kind of dying down, I rubbed this on my lower abdomen, so where your uterus would be, and it helped to kind of pick up my contractions and get things going again. Another one of my recommendations is if you have a Facebook, join miscarriage support groups. Those have been my biggest support, is just being able to ask any question that you need. There are so many ladies who have had so many different experiences and they've been extremely helpful for me. Also, if you know someone in your life who's gone through a miscarriage, I would recommend reaching out to them and asking for support. Even just hearing other people's stories is really helpful. And now I just want to validate your feelings and emotions. It is totally okay for you to not want to try and have a baby again for a long time. And it's also okay for you to want to try as soon as you possibly can. I personally felt both emotions. At first, after my miscarriages, I'm always like, I am not gonna try and get pregnant for 5 years. I am so done with this pain. I am so done with this. My body's not working and I don't want to go through it again. And then a couple of weeks roll by and I'm like, okay, I have baby fever. I want to try ASAP to get pregnant. So your emotions and your healing, it's never linear. Some days are really hard and other days are totally fine. And that's totally normal, and it's totally okay for you to feel however you're feeling. Me personally, every day is different, every hour is different. Right around this time, for me specifically, is starting to get hard because I was due February 6th with my first loss, and I have a couple of friends and people in my life who were due within a couple weeks of me who are now giving birth to their babies, and I'm sitting here 9 months later, 2 miscarriages in, and still trying to conceive a healthy baby. So that's me being vulnerable and letting you guys in on it's just a process, and there's never a time that you aren't going to miss your baby, because what people don't understand is it's not just one event that happens to you. You miss out on a lifetime with your child. So I personally don't think that it'll ever get easier. I just think that your grieving will change and it'll get different. For a long time, I was doing okay with my first loss. But now that we're literally within a week or so of my due date, it's really starting to hit me hard again. And unfortunately, I have 2 losses, which means 2 due dates that will always be looming every single year. So just know that you are not alone. And if you need somebody to talk to who has gone through it, again, I have gone through both a D&C and a natural miscarriage. So I have insight on both. Please reach out to me, DM me on Instagram. I'm always here to talk. I am an open book when it comes to my miscarriages. I've just been praying that God would use my pain. If I suffer silently, it's not gonna do anything. My pain's not gonna go anywhere. So I would rather use my pain to help other women, to encourage other women, and to support other women who are going through the same thing. But I also want to say, if you aren't ready to talk about it, if you don't want to tell anybody that you've miscarried, that's okay too. I've had a lot of women reach out to me and say, hey, I had a miscarriage 2 years ago and you're the first person I'm telling because I never felt comfortable, and that's totally okay. Honestly, I kind of feel like it's not a choice. It's just what your body decides to do with the pain. And for me, my mind and my heart has chosen to use my stories. So I hope that this video gave you a little bit of insight on what to expect when it comes to having a natural miscarriage, and I hope that it was helpful. Again, if you guys have any questions or if you just need somebody to vent to, my Instagram DMs are always open. I check them every day. You guys are loved, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys.